Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rachel Cook, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Rochelle, Chief Strategy Officer at the Brandon Hall Group. Thanks for joining us today for another Excellence at Work podcast. I'm here with some very exciting news. Great industry news. And this is to talk more about BTS's acquisition of Sounding Board. And I've got two experts from BTS here today with me. Katrin and Christine are going to kind of take us through what they believe are the most important aspects and what this means today and tomorrow for their customers and prospective customers. So Katrin, I'm going to have you introduce yourself and then Christine.
Yeah, thank you for having us. My name is Katrin Mulford. I'm an SVP at BTS. It's my second time around at BTS. I came back to BTS in 2013, and I lead our coaching center of excellence that looks after the coaching specifically that is technology enabled and for mid-level leaders, first-level leaders, and individual contributors.
And hi, Michael, thanks for having us. I'm Christine Tao. I'm one of the founders of Sounding Board, was the former CEO of Sounding Board prior to the acquisition of BTS, and now continuing on with my co-founder, Lori Maison, in working with Katrin to help continue to scale the offering under the global BTS brand.
Well, that's exciting. We definitely have the people that have all the information that's needed for our audience to understand what a great acquisition this is and how it's going to benefit. So Katrin, back to you. Maybe you can take us back in time. Tell us why BTS acquired Sounding Board and what's the vision for the new broader offering.
Yeah. To answer the question, I'll take you a little bit back into our history of how coaching even came into our portfolio. So when we started, which is now almost 40 years ago, we started in the strategy execution space because our founder noticed that strategy development, being owned usually by large consulting firms, lacks the execution side. And so initially, as an organization, we would just follow the strategy development consultancies around and just tag ourselves onto those for enabling leaders to execute to do the strategy execution. And we did this by providing really impactful ways in basically practicing the future of your business as a C-suite through immersive simulated experiences. So that was our core, our bread and butter for many, many, many years. And what it did is ingrain something in our DNA, which is to have a strategy culture first lens when we're solving a problem for a client. So we don't come with a framework or with wisdom necessarily, but just with a lens of what is the organizational context in which you're solving the individual context. And as we kept doing this, clients would come back to us and say, well, wait a minute, BTS, we would love for you to also provide these really powerful immersive experience to our frontline leaders, because that's actually where execution of strategy really hits where the rubber meets the road. And so can you help us enable our first level leaders, frontline leaders, in equipping them with the capabilities, mindsets, and behaviors for strategy execution? And so we find ourselves now being an end-to-end partner for leadership development. And less than a decade ago, the only way, or one of the ways in which you could personalize that development experience was through coaching. That was the way to do it. But coaching was typically available at the executive level. That was where coaching would happen. Everyone who was an executive leader would get an executive coach. So in 2017, we acquired Coach in a Box, which was the first mover in what clients would refer to as democratized coaching, where coaching is available to leaders and employees earlier in their life, earlier in their tenure, and therefore needs to be done in a way that it can actually scale so you can reach many, many people. And so you design and deliver this a little bit differently. So in 2017, when we made this acquisition, this became part of our portfolio. And for us, it's a great way to still personalize how you equip leaders to get to what the organization defines as great performance faster. as we've been bringing coaching into our portfolio has grown organically and inorganically at that same time, and our priorities and investment has gone into many other areas. Coming out of the pandemic, basically 2022, 2023, we started noticing a shift in how our clients are looking at coaching. First of all, a big shift was that because everyone was sort of coming out of these crazy years, coaching was back more to be around leadership coaching, not necessarily wellness and mental well-being coaching, which has a place. We're not playing in that space. But as we were getting more and more contacted by clients, we actually also noticed a shift in the technology capabilities that were required that we hadn't invested in. So we did what any company has to do. You need to decide, do we build in-house, do we license, or do we buy? And we explored actually all the options. And right at the same time, the Sounding Board team was looking for a new home, which was a, lovely coincidence. And so this is actually how we ended up deciding that we would be really, really good partners. So we're lucky that right at that time, Christine and Lori were also looking for a new home. We also acquired Boda in 2023 to complement our coaching. So we now have an end-to-end coaching offering where we can distinguish between coaching for individual contributors, first and mid-level leaders, and then executive level leaders, which we service a little bit differently. And the vision is to basically be able to offer this one-stop shop for enterprises globally, which are already our client organizations we partner with, to bring really impactful coaching experiences to these different leader levels and use where appropriate, use the technology to actually support that and deliver this at high impact, high quality, and also at scale.
That's a great overview. And Christine, I'm sure you have more to offer in terms of the story and how it all unfolded.
Yes, I mean, Katrin captured most of it, but I think what I'll add is that, so when Lori and I started Sounding Board in 2016, so almost 10 years ago, Lori, my co-founder, had been a coach for almost 30 years, primarily coaching at the executive levels. And so we always had this vision of bringing that very personalized experience of executive coaching down into the organization through the use of technology. And it was always with the lens of really having those leaders have impact beyond just their individual development, but to really have organizational impact. And for us, that has always meant, in terms of how we've built the technology and the platform, into ensuring that we have really rich organizational context, whether that's at a company level, at the leadership capabilities and values level, or even at the individual level with self-assessment, feedback, and manager feedback. And so that was the piece, I think, that got us really excited about BTS, because given their broad set of solutions in the talent, strategy, and even sales enablement, change and transformation space, I really feel like there's no other company out there that holds more organizational context than BTS in terms of the real sort of nuances of a business and what it takes for someone and a leader to be successful. And so for us, it felt like such a great match to be able to partner with an organization that had that context and also was working with their clients at a global level, across multiple functions, across multiple solutions. And so we feel like, when you think about coaching and where it really can have impact in really applying change and practicing behavior to accelerate behavior change at scale, it really felt like a good fit. And I'll say, certainly coming into, so the acquisition happened about 3 months ago now. So, and it's been a very fast integration, and we are seeing just incredible demand, and the trust that clients place in BTS is really translating into new opportunities around skilled coaching.
It's a very timely acquisition for a very timely evolution that's going on within organizations. It'd be nice to talk about that, where you can both kind of weigh in on it. You talk about the expanded vision of coaching And it would be great for the audience to understand from your perspectives why coaching is so important.
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and I'm sure Katrin can layer on. One of the things that we have really seen is that in times of rapid change and transformation, that coaching as a modality really starts to become embraced by organizations even more, partially because it's something that can be really individualized even at scale and can drive behavior change in an accelerated fashion. And I think, as you can see with what's happening in the market, whether companies are reorganizing or they are looking at even restructuring to deal with a lot of the changes around AI technology, or even just the broader sort of political environment, what's that meant is that they are really requiring more out of their leaders in terms of leadership, and they need that at every level. And so we have certainly seen, we saw it coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing it now, that coaching as a modality really has become a go-to modality now that it is available at scale for companies when they are thinking about driving change, especially in volatile environments. The other thing I would say is that for us at Sounding Board specifically, what we started to see, having been in the space for the last 10 years, is while COVID accelerated the adoption of digital coaching primarily around, say, wellness or mental health, the sort of enduring use case for coaching in an enterprise environment really has been around leadership, and that more and more companies are wanting their leadership development efforts to be integrated with their coaching efforts. And so I think that was really what fed our vision with BTS, that given their broad range of solutions around developing leaders at scale, whether it's through immersive experiences, training, or even online digital journeys, having that being more seamlessly integrated with coaching was something the market was really wanting. And so I think both of those things are two factors that are really driving not only an expanded vision of coaching for us at BTS, but just what is happening in the market overall.
Now, Katrin, how are you seeing companies finding value in coaching as they look to kind of navigate, grow, change, become future ready? Where do you see the application?
Yeah, if I build off of how Christine just described, right, where coaching in general is the right move and a really impactful move, I think what we're seeing with coaching for organizations is the coaching itself can it's just a great accelerator for the individual to make sense of themselves and make sense of the impact that they're having, and find ways to be really targeted and focused on what's my edge, like where am I currently stuck and how can I actually remove that through like one or two foundational shifts, that if we then align these with the organizational or cultural shifts a company is going through, I think you get really great alignment, accelerated alignment of what the individual targets with what the content the organization currently needs. Because I believe that's where where you move the needle with leadership development, when the coaching really closely aligns to these organizational goals and ties it back to where the individual is in their life, in their maturity, in their career, right? There's so many aspects that influence who we are and how we show up in a day to day. And it's hard, right? We're getting thrown a lot of things at us. And so to navigate these successfully, to navigate them in a way that's sustainable for the individual, that's where coaching can play a great role. But for that to work, we believe the coaching needs to have a really high degree of organizational context. This is what Christine was talking about earlier, which is what attracted our two firms, right? Where we realized this is not the way I like to think about it. Coaching is not about a pleasant conversation. It's about a purposeful conversation. Many coaching conversations are pleasant. So where it's disconnected from the organizational context, you ask the individual, they would still say, I loved it. It was really helpful for me, right? So I'm not discrediting it. But I think where organizations have the biggest yield is, and the biggest impact and value is, if you know why you're using coaching in service of developing leaders in time, in a place, in a context, and you tie the organizational and strategic context to that. So you give the coaching a frame of reference, and that in our mind is the difference, where you can see leadership behaviors change in a way that's actually noticeable. And it's not random what changes. which is, you can get that through other types of coaching. But if the company funds it, wouldn't it be best if it's in service of your development as a leader and the impact that you have on others as a leader?
Michael, I might give you two examples and two very different ones where we're seeing companies deploy coaching at scale. So, one company that we actually both work with in the biotech space, they themselves are going through a rapid change. And what they invested in a few years ago was really around senior leader development to sort of prepare for change. Now, what we're doing with them is we'll be sending 1,000 leaders over the next year through a large scale manager journey where BTS is providing a learning journey, in person, immersive experiences. And then that gets followed up with coaching that will be delivered by a sounding board coach to help them actually practice those behaviors and put them into practice in their ongoing daily challenges. I think that is a model we are starting to see more and more companies take on, where they're looking at how training might be able to deliver first initial awareness, education, content, and then the coaching is application of that into individualized and personalized practice. The other example I thought of was very different company, sort of innovative fintech company preparing for an IPO. And what they have realized is, what got them to this amazing milestone for them in terms of a business may actually require different behaviors out of their leaders in this next phase of growth. And so Sounding Board is partnering with them, 50 plus leaders that will be going through coaching that's also paired with a new values and leadership capabilities framework that they've developed over the next year that really starts to name new behaviors that really will drive performance for them in this next phase of growth for the company. And so I think they're, very different industries, very different business milestones and needs. And yet both companies have landed on this sort of approach of training and education alongside coaching to really help them forward that behavior change quickly. And I think that's the sort of overall theme that we're seeing happening across every industry.
What examples come to mind for you, Katrin?
Yeah, I mean, the additional use cases that are maybe less traditional thought of for coaching, where professional development, individual development, development gaps, developing your legacy as a leader. Those are the obvious ones, right? Other use cases where we're seeing coaching being really impactful, especially when you do it at scale, is for cultural transformation. So imagine cultural transformation, first of all, is hard because you're really trying to disrupt and upend something that's deeply ingrained, that's habitual, that's routine, that's not even, it's very sort of written into the code of how people sort of deal with each other and interact, and the types of conversations they have and they don't have versus the type of conversations they maybe should have. And to drive cultural change, to get towards a desired culture that is actually maybe more attuned to what you need as a business and what you need to do to be a player in the market, and whichever market you play, whatever business model you're in. It really helps if you can you really service this change, a cultural change, when you make the new habits and the new norms really palpable at the beginning, one at a time. Right. So everyone can see them. Everyone can see it's a significant departure from the past, where this is the real art in how you drive cultural change. And of course, the bungee cord back into the old ways at the beginning is always stronger, right? Because the new is the smaller. The new habit is the less practiced, is the less experienced. And we actually use coaching for that. We often use a group coaching modality just to bring groups of people together in peers to actually help them with that habitual change. And what happens as a result of that is now you get a little bit of noise and sort of energy in the organization that you actually need to make this pivot point from the bungee cord pulling you always back into your old ways towards the new ways. And that's where coaching, I don't think, is used as much. We have done this actually with large organizations, for example, around shifting their operating model to an agile operating model by providing what we call sprints. So in line with agile language, And these sprints are actually supported by a coach. And, we're not teaching agile methods. What we're actually doing is the coaches work with the individuals to actually find ways to break through the mold, break through the habit, and dare trying on what's already on paper and on posters, and support them in their own audacity, in their courage to actually try on, and knowing they'll face resistance and there will be moments where this doesn't feel right because the organization hasn't practiced it enough to feel it to be the norm. So I would think that's a very interesting use case for coaching that is maybe less leveraged.
I love all of the examples you gave because organizations that are probably listening are thinking of the mainstream, but to really bring the versatility and the adaptability of coaching, you have to really kind of dig through some of these other examples. But you know what the question is I'm going to ask you next. It wouldn't be a question about technology in 2025 unless we asked about AI, right? So let's get the AI question going. How are you leveraging AI in coaching, and how do you see this evolving?
Yeah, it's all over the place for us and for our clients. Transparent. I will tell you what we're noticing if we compare ourselves to some of our competitors in the coaching market. We're actually taking a bit of a different approach, which has its pros and its cons, as you can imagine, because if we get compared, we sometimes can get stuck. What we actually believe is that right now the technology is evolving so fast that the best way we can actually support organizations is to be as nimble as possible as they can be with the type of the technology that they're using to bring AI enabled or enhanced coaching into the coaching offering. So we're actually not putting a foot down on we're gonna have the bot at this point in the coaching session. Technically we can do that. So if that's the requirement or if that's what the client wants, we can actually do that. We have the capabilities. We also have capabilities that are actually complementary to coaching, which have to do with practicing the actual conversation and the actual behavior in real time with a role play, right? Which now gives you practice data versus coaching data. And so so we actually see this complementary. But the way we actually think about this is the thing that we're learning in this space is that the first thing we need to understand now with an organization is how are they thinking about partnering with the technology? Do they want give us a guidance and tell us what it is? We have that end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum we have is, no, we want to co-create this with you. And we're navigating all of it in between, for which we actually think one specific AI-enabled coaching touch point that sits on the platform is actually not solving that. So we are currently using our different capabilities in-house to bring them to the client based on their own appetite with fixed and ready versus co-create with them, all the way to enable you to write your own bots on the platform. Because our clients are at different maturity stages already, even though this is such a new technology, the disparity is already huge in terms of how clients leverage it or not. And that's that's the approach we're taking.
And Christine, what's the perspective that you see and where AI is going in coaching?
Yeah, so prior to the acquisition by BTS, Sounding Board had done our own prototyping. We had already used, and we currently already use AI in our matching algorithm. So how we drive the coach and coachee match, we have used AI for that for actually quite some time. Then we did some prototyping around sort of like a front end experience, right? Was it a sort of scenario and role modeling? Was it a coach and chatbot that you could that could nudge you between sessions, and then even potentially using recommendations for what goals could be applicable for a leader that was working with a coach. Now, obviously, having come into BTS, we're looking at how do we reconcile efforts they already had in motion. They had acquired a company called Wonderway, I think about a year and a half ago. That is a pretty robust solution for them already in the area of practice bots, as Katrin had mentioned. And they've actually already built and had that utilized for lots of standard leadership capabilities and needs. So now we're looking at how do we start to bring those together, because as everyone knows, the AI technology is evolving quickly. And so the race really is around how do you gather more data and context that then drives and frames and guides the AI to help really make the right, whether it's recommendations, providing content, or things like that that are actually relevant to that specific organization. And so that's where we have landed now, where, like Katrin said, if companies are wanting something out of the box, they have already standardized practice bots that have been standardized around standard use cases across sales, enablement, leadership. And we're also looking at how we continue to keep pace with the technology, as well as client maturity and readiness to be able to continue to evolve that to meet client needs. So I'd say it's a fast-moving industry and market. I'm sure everyone is testing different things, and even at very different levels of adoption, we've found. And so it'll be interesting, ask me again in 3 months, and I'm sure it will be a different answer again because of what's actually happening.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, is that as we do this podcast now, things are evolving. As soon as we get off, things will be different than it was a half an hour ago. Well, Katrin, thank you very much for joining. What an insightful discussion that went well beyond the very interesting news that BTS had acquired Sounding Board. Look forward to that 3-month catch-up, Katrin, that you spoke about. This is Michael Rochelle, Chief Strategy Officer for the Brandon Hall Group. Thank you both for joining us. Thank the audience for joining us as well. And we look forward to another episode.